A science and a maths focus, a part of the WITS faculty, also Professor Elizabeth Walton, also from WITS. Thank you both. And let me just start with your overall impression, where we are as a country, where we want to be, education such a big concern. Looking at the overall pass rate, are you impressed? Starting with you, Professor.
Well, I think the one thing you've got to say is over the last 3 years there's been sort of slight increments, and with a bit of spin and inclusion of progressed and non-progressed learners, you can spin out something that looks quite impressive. But the advantage that we get at this time of the year is at least the attention of the nation is focused on the education system, and we get a chance to talk about the education system in general. And the figures only show one part of the story. So while 76% basically represents 3 out of every 4 learners are passing, passing doesn't actually mean a great deal. It's more important to know how many are actually getting a bachelor's pass to access university. And that's actually only more like 1 in 4 learners. So the system is doing a lot better. I happened to pick up a newspaper cutting from 1991 as I was going through my papers. And in those days, of course, the system was segregated, and it reported on the then Department of Education and Training. And 39% of black learners passed Matric in that year.
Sure. So
you can say that we've gone a long way since then. Of course, there was a tremendous amount of disturbance in the schools at that time.
Professor Walton, your overall impression, just let's remind people of those numbers. When progressed learners are included, that means basically everybody who wrote the national pass rate 72.5% up from 70.7 last year.
As Professor Rolnick said, it's not a massive increase, but it's obviously reflecting some improvements in the system. I think we should be positive about that. We should encourage the growth that has taken place. But I am concerned that preoccupation with the national pass rate prevents us from looking at all sorts of other things that are really important as we look at the education system. But it is really nice that the whole country is focusing on education and is interested in education and is looking to see how can we work together to improve the education for our learners.
So basically this tells us nothing about quality and standards and things like that.
It doesn't tell us everything we need to know about those things.
And of course then learners, I'll come back to you, but first Professor, learners are heading towards university, those 1 in 4 with a bachelor pass. There are also ructions at university, so it's not a clear future either, and we do know there are difficulties integrating at some of the universities.
Sure, and places are limited. We know that there have been far more applicants than places are available, so it doesn't necessarily follow that a plain bachelor pass necessarily gets you into a program of your choice.
Let's look at some of the issues that she raised, the hot topics. Retention. Now this is, remember when the NDP came, we were looking at how many people start as young learners in grade 0, grade R, and move up through the system. She was talking about a figure, 58% of young people now completing 13 years. That is up from 39% in 1995. Starting with you, Professor, is the retention of learners a really good story here?
The retention of the learners is probably a big story, because I think it goes to the point of trying to put a lot of attention at the lower parts of the system. And when you throw into that mix the fact that in the last year we lost about 100,000 learners between the ones who registered and the ones who wrote, it's actually even a better story that who made it all the way to grade 12.
You've highlighted something, because they kept on saying over 800,000 pupils registered, but 100,000 or more actually dropped out. They registered but didn't write. So that's what you're talking about. Yes.
So I think that is one thing that really needs looking into, that you've struggled to get all these learners all the way to grade 12. and then another 100,000 don't make it to the starting blocks. That's about 12.5%.
It's big. Any thoughts on this problem?
So I think we must be encouraged by the fact that we are managing to retain learners in the system. Still, 58% is not great. That means that more than a third of our young people are being lost to the schooling system on the way. Quite a few do end up in vocational and technical education, but there are still a number of young people who are dropping out. Our biggest areas of concern are the grade 9, 10 and 11 years, where learners, the accumulation of learning deficit just becomes so much. Schools sometimes put pressure on those learners not to continue because they're concerned about the pass rate. So the issue of losing the learners through the system must continue to be our focus.
What does it say when you look at the progressed learners? I think of the progressed learners, there was about 100,000. I think about 27% passed. So first explain what a progressed learner is. And then what does this mean? Should we really try and encourage those progressed learners to sit and write the exams, or to look for alternatives, given that less than a third got through?
So the progressed learners are learners who wouldn't actually have made the promotion requirements for promotion to the next grade.
So they pushed through to Matric?
Well, yeah. So they've been allowed particular dispensations at those higher grades to continue. And I actually think that what it shows is that those are learners who we would have lost to the system, because we know that learner retention is a predictor of early school leaving. And so the fact that many of learners actually went on, they passed. Quite a lot of them got bachelor's passes. The minister mentioned the distinctions that many of those learners got. Actually, that means that those are learners who should be given a chance. The issue is not just progressing learners at grade 10, 11, or grade 9, 10 and 11, but actually looking at how we can remediate learning difficulties much earlier on, so we don't have this situation where we get this pressure on school leaving at grade 9 and 10 because we've addressed the problems earlier.
All right, so you're seeing that 27% in a positive light, because otherwise they wouldn't have even asked. I'm going to come back to you, Professor, but let's cross live now to Voter World. Aldrin St. Pierre, SABC reporter, is standing by with the Minister of Education.